What first inspired you to pursue a career in law?
Well, my route to a career in law was pretty circuitous. I did law at university, but I had no intention of practicing. I was going to go into industry. I went for a final interview at Unilever, and the then company secretary took me on one side and said, "Don't do this, there's more of a lawyer in you than you think." So I did the solicitor's exams, went into articles. I have to confess, didn't enjoy it. So I went to work in the city as an investment analyst. When I was in articles, I'd seen the bar in action. I'd loved what I'd seen. I enjoyed the advocacy, and I thought that's what I want to do. But I was a woman. It was the mid-70s, a grammar school girl, Red Brick University, and I didn't have a connection. And I thought all that would be held against me in trying to make a career at the bar. But it was the trigger of seeing the advocates in court that decided me that I had to give it a go, and that's what I did.
So you felt it was something that was unattainable initially?
I thought I wouldn't stand a chance. I didn't think I'd be accepted, and I thought it would be very hard as a woman with no connections, non-Oxbridge, making a living.
See, I mean, that's quite interesting because I don't think I ever really thought about going into law seriously. I think the first person that actually made any reference to it was my mother. I was the youngest girl in the family, and being a young girl in a family, a large Asian family, you learn to advocate for your rights very quickly. And so she thought that there was this adversarial skill that I had, but I think that's a polite way of saying I was a little bit of a handful. And then it was only when I started in the debating society, and you'll know that when you debate, you're told 10 minutes prior of what your position will be. And I was told that I would be debating the right for Lucifer to remain in existence on the earthly plane. And I thought, oh goodness, how am I going to get through this? But I won the debate. And that's when I thought, oh, well, perhaps Mum might be right. There might be something in this. But just like you, it wasn't something that I'd given any serious thought to, because I thought, it was a dream. You don't really see many Asian women sitting as judges. So it's a real privilege to be sitting here and talking like this about this topic today. So, Nicola, what was your experience as a young woman embarking on a career in law?
It was positive and it was negative. Positive were the people who were really helpful, inclusive and friendly. The negative side was an assumption on the part, I have to say, of clerks, that as a woman I would do only certain types of work. I was offered pupillage in Cardiff. I'm Welsh. But it was clear to me then that I would be pigeonholed into doing crime or family. I have the greatest respect for those who work in the fields, really challenging fields, but it was too early for me to be pigeonholed. I wanted a broad common law-based practice. In the chambers where I was taken on and where I remained until I became a judge, on the day I got my tenancy, my senior clerk said to me, "I want you to understand that for the first 3 or 4 years, everything will be okay, but then you'll see the gentleman in this set doing work that you won't be able to do. It's called civil work." He said, "It's not that I don't want you to do it, but solicitors won't instruct you." And I was really taken aback at that. And that really was the main challenge. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? And I thought, well, I'll just do this quietly, because I just didn't have the confidence to challenge a senior clerk saying that to me. And so I just quietly went about it. I did anything that came in through the door. So I did a lot of pleadings, general personal injury work, industrial accident work. And of course that got me into court in the county court for many years. And that established me as a civil practitioner. That really was the main challenge to start with.
Did it take you longer then in order to establish that practice?
You mean as opposed to men?
As opposed to men?
No, it didn't. Because 3 of us started out together, and I never saw any difference as between Hugh, Dever or myself in the type of work we were doing. We each began to specialise in different areas, but I didn't feel I was going one way because I was a woman. I really did have a general common law practice until some 7 years or so down the line, I began to specialise in the field of medical law.
Do you think that's something that still exists in this day, those types of concerns around pigeonholing and expectations?
Yes, sadly, I think it does. I think It is a concern I have. I was presiding judge in Wales for 4 years, between 2013, 2017. And I would ask women in practice at bar how they were getting on. And too often I heard the refrain that they weren't able to do the civil work they wanted or not able to do as much as they wanted. And that concerned me. And I felt matters really hadn't moved on. What about you?
So I can actually say when I look back and think about my years starting in law, that they were actually very positive. I look back and I remember I was working in crime at a time where we had a director of public prosecutions. It was a woman at the time, the chief crown prosecutor for the area, who was very present in our day-to-day careers, was also a woman. My pupil mistress was a very strong woman. So I just remember being surrounded by these incredible women who wanted to make sure that I was thriving. You know, I remember my first day in court, having tips from what to wear, what to say, what not to say. And these incredible women who just didn't want me to make the mistakes that they had made, who understood and empathized what a first day in court can be like. And as you know, when strong women support strong women, there's a lot of power there. And so I just recall my early years being incredibly supportive. I even remember there were women who were not working in the organizations that I were working in. They were at the bar, but obviously saw something that they wanted to nurture and encourage in us young women, and they would take us under their wings and advise us on complex cases. So I can really say that I really enjoyed my early years, and I was probably quite protected from some of what you may have experienced.
Well, Safia, I'm really heartened to hear that. I'm also heartened that a lot of the support and encouragement came from women, because when I was coming through, the women weren't around. I was never led by a woman. I never had a woman role model. And just hearing of your experience does show that some years down the line, matters certainly have improved insofar as women are there and supported.
I think that's really important. I think it's important to recognise that there's women that have gone before my generation, like yourself, like Baroness Hale, more internationally known. We've heard of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And so those women have challenged the system, they've overcome the obstacles, but more importantly, they've left the door open. And it's, you know, that ability to look back and reach out and make sure that there's a pathway for us younger women is definitely something that I feel. Don't get me wrong, there are still challenges, there's still things that need to be done, but I think there has to be a recognition that your generation has paved the way for ours.
Well, I hope it has, and I hope we are still out there proactively supporting other women. That is certainly my experience. I know I've done it because I know what I went through, and I know that insofar as I had mentors, they were all men, and they did support me and encourage me and advise me. But I've positively tried to do that where women are concerned, because there are particular issues where I think women to this day need support.
Yes, and I think women are very good at being collegiate. I think we're very good collaborators. And I think it would be nice to see that excel and just exist more in our systems. And I think that's a huge skill that women do bring, that collaboration and that understanding.
I think we're also quite honest with each other and quite frank with the difficulties we're facing too.
I think so. So why did you actually become a judge? I'm sure there's people watching this that will really want to know what it was that inspired you to become a judge.
Well, I'd been in silk for a number of years. As I say, my field was medical law, and I loved it. I loved the spectrum of work that I did in silk. It was exciting, hugely demanding, but very satisfying. I was sitting as a part-time judge, initially as a recorder and then as a Deputy High Court judge. And what I enjoyed about judging was the neutrality, because, of course, as an advocate, you're always fighting someone's corner. But as a judge, you're in the middle, you are listening. And you can listen with a completely open mind and should listen with a completely open mind. And there came a time when I thought, so what now? I'd been round a few tracks by then. I'd done a few cases, and I thought the time was right for another challenge, and that's why I applied. What about you?
So I decided to become a judge. I gave it some very careful consideration, but for me, always in all my roles, it's been really important to be part of something that's bigger than myself. to be in a role that has impact, that I feel that actually in time I can grow with the role so that I can create influence and impact, and just feel that when you go home that you've actually made a difference. As you know, being a judge is a vocational career, and I actually feel that this is the one role that I do feel that I do make an impact in, you know, from the people that see you in your courtroom to the wider network we have. You know, we're judges in England and Wales, but there's an international judiciary as well. As you know, there's been challenges with women judges in Afghanistan. And so I just think we have a responsibility to understand, you know, how the judiciary for women, how that's impacted across the world. For me, it's quite exciting to be in a role that has the possibilities and the opportunities that we have in order to create change and make a bit of a difference.
Are you enjoying the day-to-day work?
I am.
Yes.
I am. Obviously I'm very new to the judiciary, so I'm learning very much every day. I'm very fortunate. I have a very supportive team. So as new judges, we have senior judges that work closely with us.
Before I became a judge, one of the fears I had was that I'd be lonely, because a lot of people say it's a lonely life as a judge. I've never found it lonely. I found it incredibly collegiate. What's your experience?
Exactly that. I think people probably think that because they, you know, when they see judges, we sit alone, we make our own decisions independently. But I think there's a real understanding as to the challenges that the role presents. And so I've had nothing but that experience that, you know, nothing's too much trouble. You know, we're very much supporting each other. I've learnt so much just within the last year, but I wouldn't be able to be where I am if it wasn't for the people around me, for the judges around me that have given their time, they've given their support. So far, I would say it's been incredibly collegiate, yes.
Good.
Can I ask you, Nicola, which female predecessors have inspired your career?
There were none. When I was coming through, there were no senior women. I was never led by a woman. I had no female role models. I hope your experience was different.
It was, actually. I think, I've mentioned already that I was surrounded by very strong women who were supportive, but I think for me what was quite pivotal to inspiring me to pursue a career in law was the writings by Baroness Kennedy. And so I found her book, particularly when Eve was framed, I found it in a charity shop for £4.20, I think. The pages have now yellowed, but it still sits on my bookcase, and it's the one book that will stay with me, because in her book, she talked very much about why women were needed in the justice system. She talked about the facts that, you know, when we have women who are perpetrators, women who are victims, you need women on the judiciary, because otherwise, how are you representing women? How are you a representative judiciary? And it really struck me. And she writes very candidly about her experiences in chambers, her experiences at the inn. And I can contrast one of her experiences. She talks about the dinner that you have at the inn, and her first dinner and the first debate that happened, where they debated about the clothes that Helena Kennedy was wearing at the time, Baroness Kennedy now was wearing at the time, and the skirts, the length of her skirt, and what that may mean about her morality. And I remember reading it as a student thinking, gosh, that sounds so challenging to be having to deal with that. Whereas my own experience, my first night at the inn, I was the junior of the house, and not that I was expecting to be the junior of the house. And I debated the master of the house about the smoking law that was coming in, and it was just a very positive experience. So I just keep that book because it reminds me of how far we've come, but actually there's probably still a lot more to do. But she touches in a very human way as to why we need women to help breathe life into the rules of law that we have. So I'd say she was very influential in me coming to the bar. So Nicola, how do you feel the profession has changed, and what challenges do you think women now face in the profession?
Well, firstly, the profession has recognised that women in certain circumstances need support and encouragement. I think the first was in respect of their caring responsibility and children. We now, There was maternity leave, it's now known as parental leave. That is really important. The particular challenges at the moment are in respect of allocation of work and the gender income gap, and they're linked. We need a much more fair and transparent system of allocation of work, because if work isn't fairly allocated, the results are insidious. Because we all need cases behind us in order to progress our career, whether it's to be able to do the next difficult case or whether you're applying for an appointment, be it silk or as a judge, you need those cases as evidence of your competence. And for too long, there has been a lack of transparency as to how work is allocated. And that also goes to the disparity of gender income. There was a very concerning report published by the Bar Standards Board in February of this year, which really did show the gender income gap, which has increased over the last 20 years, even though there are more women at the bar. And that, again, has insidious consequences. Some women feel they can't afford to stay at the bar any longer, particularly, again, those with caring responsibilities. And one of the real challenges we have is retention of women at the bar, not only retention, but also progressing them to higher positions. And if they were in positions where they knew they were being fairly treated in terms of the allocation of work and the fees they are being paid, then I would very much hope that that would be a positive incentive, A, to stay at the bar, and secondly, to apply for appointment either within the bar or outside it.
Just wondered, Nicola, what your view was on diversity in the judiciary.
It is improving, but we have a long way to go. It is encouraging to see within the tribunal system and certainly within district judges far more women and members of ethnic minorities, but that is because I think they're more accessible and they're friendlier in terms of hours and how you can use that work, certainly if you have caring responsibilities. Within the circuit bench, matters have improved greatly. Within the senior judiciary, we still have a long way to go. Within the High Court and the Court of Appeal, insofar as women are concerned, we average about 24-25%. At the Supreme Court level, there's just one woman at the moment, and that's Lady Rose. So we really do have a long way to go, and that is why we need to proactively encourage and ensure women have a fair chance to apply for these appointments.
I think it comes back to your point about retention, doesn't it? Is if we're losing women, within, say, 5 years of entering the legal career, it's not just about people coming into the career, it's retaining them throughout that and then also entering senior positions in the judiciary.
Well, it means that if women aren't retained, the pool is smaller, and that is why more men come through. And again, it goes to the income gap. One of the statistics that came out of the BSB report was that the highest earning group are white male barristers. And as a general statement, women from ethnic minorities across the board earn 41% of what white male barristers earn. Now, those are really concerning statistics, and those are all factors which go to the retention of women and ultimately lead, as I say, to a smaller pool of women from whom can be taken judges.
So you're doing some work, is that right, with the inns?
That's absolutely right. In February of this year, the 4 inns joined together and launched the Inns of Court Alliance for Women. Its purpose is to provide a forum for women to meet and discuss the issues which they are facing, and for us to have events in which we will look carefully at these matters and take them forward in order to provide advice and support for women. One such event was directed at senior clerks and heads of chambers. An aspect of it was the fair and transparent allocation of work, because we know that at the core of many women's practice, it begins with the work they're allocated, and that is why we were concerned that there should be fair and transparent allocation. But It is the first time that the four inns have joined together in this way, and it will be a proactive alliance, the word has been chosen very carefully, to better support women and inform and encourage them.
And there's never been anything like this before.
There was a Women's Temple Forum, which was in a Middle Temple. This is the first time the four inns have joined together in a concerted attempt.
What advice would you give to anyone that's watching this video, young women that are thinking about entering the profession or maybe in the profession? What advice would you give to them?
The first piece of advice would be believe in yourself, because I don't think women are very good at believing in themselves, and I'm certainly one of those. Have confidence in your ability and take it forward. Anything is possible. I think if I've made it, anyone can make it. Bear in mind it won't be easy. It is a tough job. It's a pressurised job, but you're surrounded by really good people. And one of the memories I've always had at the bar, and it remains within the judiciary, is the open door policy. You will know this. People are always willing to listen and help. If you ask, they respond. That really has been one of the most positive aspects of the bar and, for me, the judiciary. And so it is, don't be afraid. And if you're not feeling very confident, pretend. As a recent judicial appointee, what advice would you give to someone who's thinking about embarking on a career in law?
I think my advice would be very similar to what you said, is to go for it. I think for me, I hadn't really considered coming into the judiciary. It was everybody else around me that encouraged me to apply. And I think more and more now you're seeing younger men and women entering the judiciary. You're seeing more diversity. So I'm hopeful now that people who are thinking about entering a career in the judiciary see themselves. They see role models that reflect perhaps communities that they've come from. It doesn't seem so unattainable now. So my advice would be, don't give up, and to go for it. Like you said, I think there's an incredibly powerful narrative when you're at law school, which is all about how only a very small percentage of people will get through to pupillage and a small percentage of people will make it to the judiciary. If you couple that with being from an ethnic minority, being from a different socioeconomic background, it suddenly has the opportunity to derail ambition. And I would just say to anyone, don't let that happen. Every time that narrative reached my ears, what I did was did anything to make myself look different, stand out, take any opportunities that arise. I remember working and studying and working for free, doing lots of voluntary work. So there's always a way if you really want to do something. And I think I'm hoping today anyone that's watching this will see how accessible the judiciary can be and how it is moving forward now. We are more diverse. There are more women here than before. And so I think there's much to be hopeful for the future.
And in 10 years' time, where would you like to see the judiciary?
In 10 years' time, I'd like it to be quite flexible. I think we have a generation coming through that wants to work quite differently to how we have worked before. So I think the judiciary needs to be aware of that and be responsive to that. I would like to see more women in the Supreme Court. I think that would be something that I would definitely like to see in the next 10 years.